Dun dun dun! It's frame relay. No, run, Bobby. It's not that bad, but at the same time, frame relay was one of those concepts when I was learning CCNA many moons ago. I still remember going, wow, I hope the exam isn't very heavy on this because I don't feel very strong just because it is a bizarro world technology. But that's my hope right now is that I'm able to describe it in such a way that first off, it will take some time to percolate, so give it some time, but you'll be able to see it and go, okay, I think I see how that works. Those pieces really click for me. So we're going to look at what the big picture of frame relay is, talk about why we're still discussing this decade plus old technology, and it's still very relevant today. Look at a lot of the terms, including one of the big ones, DELCs. That's the addressing. And then we'll see some of the design options. Before we go anywhere with frame relay, I want to discuss the proverbial elephant in the room, in that some people may say, well, I thought frame relay is old. As a matter of fact, we've migrated our networks away from frame relay. Isn't this like decades old? Why are we discussing something that's going away? So, I had the same question, especially when I found out as Cisco continued to revise the CCNA exam, frame relay kept increasing. There was more and more and more of it, and I thought this doesn't make sense. And then I thought about it. I was like, oh well, okay, it kind of does. Think of frame relay as a platform. So it's not the first of its kind of technology. Like if we were to say packet switch networking, which is what frame relay is an umbrella. There are technologies like X25. That's the one that really forged the way, the original one. Then came frame relay. Then came ATM, then came MPLS, and who knows what continues on from there. All these technologies are similar, but frame relay really set the standard of like, okay, here's how everything works. And that concept, like as you learn the concepts of frame relay, you're going to go, oh, okay, well, let's say you wanted to learn ATM or MPLS, it's going to be like, oh, okay, so it's kind of like frame relay, it's just they did this, this, and this. Oh, yeah, okay. So it's almost like frame relay is that springboard that everybody has to learn. Think of it like the RIP routing protocol, and that's kind of a tough analogy because Cisco's pulled RIP out of the CCNA world as well. But RIP, the routing protocol RIP, for a long time, like nobody really used it in production networks, but it was like one of those things you had to learn because it really set the base of understanding. Like, okay, that makes sense. So OSPF, oh, okay, so OSPF does this and this and this. Oh, okay, that makes sense. So think of frame relay like that. So here's the concepts behind frame relay. And I'll just say packet switch networks in general. Somebody long ago looked at the connection type of a leased line. And leased lines are great because it is a very reliable, very available, but at the same time, very expensive connection type. And the reason it's expensive is because it's dedicated bandwidth to you. As in when a service provider says, and most people when they say, oh, okay, I've got a lease line, they'll say I've got a T1 line or I've got an E1 line or a T3 line or something to that effect, right? And that just means that the service provider, when you are bringing up a WAN link between your two offices, they are carving bandwidth out of their network and giving it to you. So if you signed up for let's go T1. T1 line, it would have 1.544 megabits per second of bandwidth. And the service provider, the carrier who owns that cable, is managing that link, literally has to go to their infrastructure and say, okay, this 1.55544, it's yours, and I will never ever touch that bandwidth again until you end your contract with me. So it's costly for the service provider. But somebody came along and said, well, you know what? Why don't we do this a little bit better? Why don't we set this up in such a way that we've got a shared pool of bandwidth for all of our customers? So from the service provider's perspective, I mean, these routers all right here could be different customers. I mean, we could have, let's say, CBT Nuggets, Oregon, and let's say CBT Nuggets opens an office in Arizona, which I hope they do. So we have CBT Nuggets Arizona, and then down here maybe we've got Nabisco, the company who makes Fig Newtons, Nabisco Texas office and Nabisco California office. These could be locations all over the place, and the service provider allows the customer to designate links. So let's just say that CBT Nugget says, okay, well, I want obviously my Oregon and Arizona office linked together, and so they create these things known as virtual links. Actually, the technical term is permanent virtual circuits. But they create a permanent virtual circuit between those two offices, so now those two routers feel like they're directly connected. And they work and they operate as if they're directly connected. Now, Nabisco is obviously going to say, okay, I want my California and Texas office connected. And so it's very flexible with the kind of connections. They're virtual connections that the service provider can bridge up to where, let's say CBT Nuggets like, hey man, we're going to give a free box of Fig Newtons with every purchase of a new series. And so they partner with Nabisco in California. The service provider can bring up that link without a problem. You don't have to bring in new cable or anything like that. They just bridge them through the virtual circuit. But let me also talk about the bandwidth. Each of these links, I'm getting a little into the terms, but this is the big idea. Each of these links is assigned what's known as a committed information rate. Think of that as the minimum amount of bandwidth that you're going to get on that link. So let's say CBT Nuggets in Oregon says, I want a 1.544 committed information rate to Nabisco in California, and they want the same thing there. Now, the beauty is the service provider will say, okay, well, you will always get that guaranteed. That'll be part of your service level agreement that you sign with them. But if you're not using your bandwidth, which there will be plenty of times where you're not, nobody uses 100% of their bandwidth 100% of the time. But when you're not using your bandwidth, it kind of goes back into the big pool of cloud bandwidth, if you will, that allows the service provider to use it for other customers. So the service provider, and this is their job, this is their business model, is they very carefully will over provision that cloud to where they'll do monitoring and they'll have eyes into that cloud and they'll be like, you know what, on average our customers only use maybe 40% of their bandwidth normally, so we can oversell. Now I'm just giving you a rough, obviously they have much more sophisticated methods, but we can oversell that by 60%. Thus, we make more money off of that cloud. Thus, we can offer it at a lower cost to the customer, and yet they still get what they're looking for, which is a good, high-quality bandwidth guaranteed connection. Because we, again, with their careful monitoring, they don't or if they do, if they over-provision it to such point, you call them on it. You say, hey, you're not living up to your service level agreement, and they'll, I don't know, give you money back or free car, or whatever they do, free box of Fig Newtons, who knows? So that's the flexibility that we have with this cloud. So we're really starting to see these kind of lines. They're still there. Don't let me say lead you astray, but these lines are still all over the place, lease lines. However, people are starting to realize, you know what? It's a lot cheaper and we can do it a lot more cost effective, and it's not just cost savings, but it's more flexible. I don't have to bring in a new line every time I want to connect to another office. Okay, in order to fill in that big picture of Frame Relay, I had to get a little ahead of myself, but now let me take a step back and fill in the terms. So when you sign up for a Frame Relay connection, you will have both a committed information rate and a local access rate. Difference is this: the local access rate. So let me draw. Here's what this looks like physically. Here's the wall of your office. You have a wall jack. Sometimes that'll go to a CSU DSU, which is just a fancy cable converter and diagnostic box that will then plug into the serial port of your router. Sometimes it'll plug directly into your router. It depends on what kind of interface you have, but a lot of times it'll look like this. And so the local access rate is how fast can that connection physically go. Meaning not logical. It's not like the service provider is limiting you based on what you pay for. I'm talking if this cable were to handle everything that this cable could handle, what is that rate? So that maybe we'll just throw out 100 megabits per second is what that line physically can handle. Well, the committed information rate then is how much is the service provider committing to give you on each one of your virtual circuits. So let me jump down here now. Again, filling in some of the terms I was throwing. Virtual circuit is a connection from one site to another. Now, it's called a permanent virtual circuit because it is always there. It's always online as long as you're connected to that service provider and paying your bill. It'll be there and it'll be running. And it's virtual. It's not like there's one physical cable I can follow and say, oh, there it is. It's the service provider establishes that connection for me. Now, this is what I pay for every single month. So every single virtual circuit will have its own committed information rate, which is how fast that virtual circuit can transmit and receive, as well as where is it connected to. So maybe this is Texas, this is Missouri. Okay, so I can actually have this virtual circuit. So they will say, okay, well, the flat connection charge for that line will be, I don't know, whatever. I'll throw out $100. And then the committed information rate that you've chosen, you've said 5 megabits per second, which, obviously it's under your local access rate. That's not dollars, but 5 megabits, that'll add, we'll just say $253 a month to that, so you have a total cost of this. So that you end up paying for each one of those virtual circuits. And you can keep adding virtual circuits, obviously, with a maximum of your local access rate. Let's say this one is a 50 megabit per second. So you see what I mean? So you can kind of keep adding those connections as you would need to. Now, we come into a new term of local management interface. LMI is a form of signaling. It is the signaling between your router and the service router. If I were to identify it on this diagram, it would be right here. This is where LMI would exist. LMI does a couple things. One, it gives a language for the service router to speak to you, to speak to your router, right here, and deliver, for instance, the list of DELCs that it has. So well, I'm already getting ahead of myself. Let's just say, give you the addresses that the Frame Relay Cloud uses. It also gives you statistics for your connection, like how many packets you've sent, how much data has been transmitted, your average rates. All of that is transmitted using LMI. Just think of that as the language of love between your router and the service router. It's kind of just this communication method. There's actually 3 flavors of LMI. There's Cisco, ANSI, and Q933A. Long ago, Cisco routers have been able to auto-detect that. So you just plug it in, and it's the default. It auto-detects. It says, okay, well, let me try talking using the Cisco language. Nope. ANSI. Nope. Oh, looks like Q933A is the other side. So we'll talk using that. So it just kind of figures it out for you. But there are 3 official languages. Okay. Now let's talk about DELCs, Data Link Connection Identifier. I want to focus you in on the first 2 words there, data link. Where does that remind you of? What image should come into your head? You know what I'm drawing, right? 1, 2, 3. It's a messed up, crooked looking OSI model. Down here is physical. Next layer up is data link. Then you have network and all that kind of stuff. So network is where you have IP addresses and if you have other protocols, they exist up there like IPX and AppleTalk and whatever else. So down here has been data link. And all this time, we've been talking about Ethernet technology. And Ethernet has a standard that says we use MAC addresses. That's the kind of address we use to identify stuff at the data link layer. However, Frame Relay is not Ethernet. Frame Relay says, well, rather than MAC addresses, Frame Relay uses something called a DELC. Think of it like a MAC address substitute, if you will, that says this is the kind of addressing we will use at layer 2 to communicate. That was the first confusing thing for me when I first learned Frame Relay, is once somebody said there's no MAC addresses, it was like the rug got pulled out from me. I was like, what do you mean there's no? Everything's got a MAC address. It can't be. It's the same process, same kind. I mean, this guy still has an IP address. Let's say he's 200.1.1.1, and this guy is 200.1.1.2, and one side needs to communicate to the other. I'll explain how it all works in a second, but think of it like this, where this guy still has to ARP, if you will, and say, what is your, but instead of saying MAC address, it says, what is your DELC number? And so it gets the DELC number back and then says, okay, I'm going to put that in the header, so it's going to come from a source IP of this to a destination IP of that, and I'm going to use a destination DELC. Let me just come down here. DELC of 500 or whatever DELC is assigned, and that will allow it to get to the other side. Now, because those DELCs are the biggest concept here, as in the biggest one you want to catch, because it directly relates to your Frame Relay configuration, I want to give it its own slide. DELCs work backwards from what we're used to, right? So here's the idea of what we're used to. Let's say we've got a couple of computers plugged into a switch. Computer at the top wants to talk to the computer at the bottom. Top is 192.168. We'll say 5. Bottom is 192.168.1.2. 6. So this computer says, okay, I want to ping you .6. So it'll send an ARP message, figure out his MAC address, and it says, okay, I'm going to ping from my source MAC and source IP address down to you with I now have you as the destination MAC and destination IP address. That's what we're used to, this kind of source destination deal. Well, Frame Relay flips it on end and does it a little backwards. Let's say that we've got Missouri and Arizona. Let's just isolate those two. The service provider might say, okay, Missouri, if you want to get to Arizona, go ahead and use Delcy 105. Arizona, if you want to get to Missouri, go ahead and use Delcy 501. It's backwards. So when Missouri says, okay, I want to go to Arizona, I'm going to say what it's not. So make sure, I'm going to say not. So this is not what it is, right? It doesn't say I'm going to come from this source and go to this destination. That is not what it is. What it does is say, okay, I'm going to send my traffic to Delcy 105. Delcy 105 gets it, sends it through the service provider, and it comes out as if it came from a source of 501. What? Say that again? Think of it this way. Okay. Let's say you go to the let's say you and I go to the airport here in Arizona, and we're going to fly to California, right? We've got the airport here. Put the little airplane symbol at the top. So you and I walk in and we say, hey, I want to fly from Arizona to California. You look at the big screen on the wall. It says you are in gate B6. So you and I walk over here to gate B6, sit down. We're waiting. Our plane comes. Whoosh, lands right here, and then we get on the plane and we fly all the way to the airport in California. So here's the California airport. So we land and we get off the plane. We're trekking in, and we happen to look over our shoulder and we see that we came in terminal A9. We're like, whoa. I pass out. You revive me. We're like, what happened? We were in B6. Did some kind of trickery happen in the air? What happened there? No, I never thought of it that way. No, you just left out of one gate, and when you landed, you came in the other gate, right? It's the same way here with these Delcy numbers. Think of it like, okay, I'm leaving Missouri. I'm going to fly out of gate 105. You fly through the air. The cloud, it works, right? We're flying through the air, through the cloud. We land, and we came in on gate 501. That's how the address. It's just completely backwards from what you're used to, which is why it takes a sec to get used to. Now, we can do the same thing. Let's say in Texas we've got 600 that gets us to Arizona, and in Arizona we've got Delcy. Let's just say 623. I'm saying this just because I want to make sure they don't have to be kind of this weird opposite, like 105 on one side, 5. It doesn't have to be that way. So 600 and 623. And so Arizona, if it wants to talk to Texas, would fly out of gate 623 and fly through the air, and it would land and come in on gate 600 or Delcy 600. If Texas wants to talk back, it goes out on 600. You kind of see how this works. Okay, so notice my big note down there. Delcies are locally significant. I know some of you have read that and you're going, what's that mean? What that means is the Delcy numbers in Arizona are only there for Arizona. So let me put it this way. The Delcies that are in use in Arizona are never told to anybody else. For instance, Texas has no idea that Arizona is using Delcy 623 to get there. So you might say, okay, I'm getting that. So why is that significant? It's significant because you will even see Delcies being reused. For example, we could have, in Texas, instead of Delcy 600 to get back, he might have Delcy 105. Now, if we're thinking with MAC addresses, we're like, no, you can't do that. Duplicate, failure, can't happen. Well, in this world, it can, because the 105 in Texas means something different than the 105 in Missouri. Matter of fact, let me tell you. Hang on, don't freak out. I could have Delcy 623 in Texas. Texas uses Delcy 623 to get to Arizona, and Arizona uses Delcy 623 to get back. Again, it's one of those, like, can you do that? Yeah, because, again, Texas never tells Arizona that it's using Del C 623. Truth be told, as soon as the packet, here's our little packet we're sending Arizona, as soon as it enters that cloud, the service provider rips that Del C right off. It's like, I'm done with that. You've told me where it's going. Now I'm going to use all of my magic methods. It's kind of like, what happens in that cloud? What happens in the cloud stays in the cloud, right? They're using all their magic methods to get it there. And then right before the packet leaves, it's like, it just sticks on that Del C 623 or sticks on that Del C 5. It doesn't actually make that sound, but it's conceptually that method. So you can have, let's go crazy. We could have Del C 623, 623 at every single one of these sites to reach back to Arizona. However, now let me throw this in there. Could Arizona have a second Del C 623? One to reach Texas, one to reach California? No, it cannot. Why? Because locally significant, but that means in Arizona locally I can't have 623 and 623 because then the service provider doesn't know which one belongs to which. So these Del Cs, their whole goal. The whole goal of these Del Cs is to identify to the service provider where you're going, and as soon as it's done its job. At that point, the service provider tears it off. It's like, I know where you're going, now let me get you there. Go back to that airport analogy. I guarantee you the airport in California also has a gate B6. Just like it does in Arizona. The reason that we don't run into conflicts is that they're different airports. All right, I'm actually going to put the dividing line right there. I think that was conceptually enough for you to just kind of, like I said, it has to percolate. You have to sit there and just kind of let that soak in for a moment. Make sure you got those concepts down. If you need to, go back and review that you've got the local access rate, committed information rate, the Del C. Oh, there is one more thing. Yeah, I was going to wrap it up, but I mentioned committed information rate. Remember I said the committed information rate, or CIR, is the minimum you get. I don't think I ever finished my thought on that. Like all good things, whenever you hear minimum, that means that there's more beyond, right? So with the committed information rate, let's say you have a 1 megabit per second committed information rate, you can actually burst above that. If there's bandwidth available from the service provider, they will often allow you to go above that. Now, this is service provider dependent and their own policies and all that kind of stuff. But if there's bandwidth available and the service provider is like, well, no one's using it, sure, you might as well get there. But it does put you into a range, and this is where you get into a concept known as traffic shaping, which we probably will not get into at this level. But traffic shaping says, okay, well, even though the physical link can go faster, I want to tell it to kind of shape around 1 megabit per second. And you start creating these graphs and say, okay, well, here I used a meg and then I went below and then right here I need to go above, so I can go a little above and then I went back below. The whole goal of the service provider is that on average you're using 1 megabit per second. So they're going to engineer their devices that say, okay, well, we'll allow you to maybe go above. Here's our line of 1 megabit per second. We'll let you go above, but that does put you into something known as discard eligible territory, meaning that traffic that goes above, if the service provider needs some bandwidth, that's going to be the first to go. They'll liquidate that stuff out of the cloud and start, throttling it back down. But that's good news, because the service provider is usually very careful on how they over provision their bandwidth. So a lot of times you'll get more than you're paying for, which is great when you need it. So that's filling in just a little bit more around that terminology. So we've seen the concepts, the terminology. Really let that Del C concept soak in there, and make sure you kind of see where those numbers are, because when we get into the configuration, I'll constantly refer back to that. And if you're still in the old world of source and destination MAC addresses, it can get really confusing. For now, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.